What's up YouTube, Demi here with another build guide. This is an interesting one. This is HotTaterTot, but it's an Avatar of Fire Ice Crash character, so I'm 100% fire damage. And we get to use Ice Crash, which works with swords, maces, axes, staves, and unarmed, and cannot be supported by multi-strike. That's pretty cool. So I'll just run a quick map while we talk about it. We basically just we're making weird builds on stream, trying every skill we could think of on flying purple people. My last raid Slayer earlier today. We did like Wild Strike, Ellie Hit, all the crazy stuff. Ice Crash, Sweep, Static Strike, Lightning Strike. I did Chimera with all of these skills, and they all felt good, but Ice Crash was I don't know, I haven't played in a long time, and I forgot how fun it was. So we decided to play it. Also, this vulnerability monster life enemy thing is not cool. But yeah, we went and ran it through the tests. Theory crafted a character for it, and we ended up with this thing. Which I then, of course, before I even did a map with it, I immediately took it into Hydra, which I will show the clips of. And then we did Shaper with it. Yeah, and then we went to stream, and now we're here. It's a pretty fun character though. I mean, the damage per hit is immense, and we don't have to worry about Reflect anymore because they got rid of it in 3.1. So that's cool. We're full fire conversion. We're utilizing a fair amount of random amounts of penetration from Zoph's Blood and Wise Oak. It's really nice actually. But the version that we theory crafted actually ended up having less DPS than this current version, which I thought was kind of interesting. And the reason we went Chieftain is so we can get that fire penetration, and the enemies take extra fire damage when they're next to a totem, right? And they deal less damage, which is pretty huge for boss fights when you just drop your Warchief totem. Normally you don't do that, but in a boss fight situation you're always going to drop your totem. So there's a random T13 shape short. Let's go talk about the character. Start with the Ascendency. So as I said, Chieftain. Number one reason, they're doing an Ascendency rework in 3.2. The Chieftain's pretty undertuned right now, so if it gets buffed, it's going to be so much better than what this currently is. But so we have Namu's Flame Advance, because we get hits and damage against burning enemies. Our Herald of Ash burns things for us. Where is it? So we can get that buff there. Then we have some fire damage stuff here, and Hinekora Death's Fury. You get 1% of fire damage leached as life, 10% fire pen, 1% of damage dealt by your totems leached to you as life, and 20% of physical damage is extra fire damage if you or your totems have killed recently. So it helps you a lot while clearing, gives you a lot of leech. We are pure fire damage, so of course we leech a ton of that. And then our next 2 points, we go for the Arohangui Moon's Presence. Enemies near your totems deal 8% less damage, so that's a defensive buff. And then enemies near your totems take increased physical and fire damage. So that's a 1.16 more multiplier for us, hooray. And then we take our last 2 points for these, just for a bunch of extra strength. Small res, reduced mana cost of scales is great, because Ice Crash is fairly hefty mana cost when you only have 160 mana. Tree looks like this. You take a bunch of life nodes. Melee damage nodes. I took Unwavering so I can't be stunned. Attack speed here. Because we can't use multi-strike and we're not using faster attacks, all the attack speed helps a lot in making sure that this feels good and making sure that your leap slam feels smooth. Scion Life Wheel, all the duelist life nodes down here, bunch of attack speed. And then two-handed nodes, life nodes, jewel sockets. We'll go over the jewels after the tree as always. I took this side of the two-handed nodes here first because of the attack speed. I'm working on this, but I'm only level 91, so it'll probably not happen for a while. And then, of course, a bunch of attack damage, just life mana, Volpact to double that from, we get 20% by default, 23% here, doubled by Volpact, 46% of our life per second, pretty good. And then Hatchet Master basically gives a ton of attack speed with axes and physical damage with axes, which is really nice. And you head over here, you get some life, you get some jewels, you get the axe nodes here for onslaught, a ton of damage and attack speed stuff. Life here, Resolute Technique because we're non-crit. We don't ally overload because that's a pretty far stretch. We'd have to get a bunch of accuracy. We just take that for guaranteed hits. Great, 100% accuracy. Woohoo. Jewel Socket, Life, Jewel Socket, Elemental Damage, Ellie Res, AoE, Area Damage, Attack Damage, Life. And then the last couple points, you have 9 points left. So I would do 1, 2, 3. And then 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Done. There's your end game level 100 tree. So jewel sockets, you have a lot of options here. Basically anything that scales two-handed axes and life, you're gonna want life on every jewel. And then I'll try to name everything that works with this build. If you want to do, okay, also if you want to do maces, take this out, put it in here. If you want to do swords, take this out, put it in here. Everything else is the same. This, remember, Ice Crash works with swords, maces, axes, staves, and unarmed. So you could also even take out this wheel and put it here if you wanted to go staves. It's totally up to you. But jewels, so you want life. You're going to want damage, increased damage, fire damage, physical damage, melee damage, damage with axes, attack speed with axes, damage with two-handed melee weapons, attack speed with two-handed melee weapons, attack speed, attack and cast speed, area damage. I think I got most of them. There's a pretty big list. Basically anything that matches your damage rate. We are pure fire, and we're physical to fire conversion, so. But yeah, the way the conversion is working, I'm going to the items now. I'm using a Disfavor, Devotos, Zoph's Blood. This is what's converting, right? Because we get Avatar of Fire here, we save the 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, wait, sorry. 1, 2, 3, 4 points here. But this is like 3x. If you don't have the 3x for this, just spend the 4 points. It's fine. You use a rare amulet at that point. But this gives you 10% fire penetration, and then covers enemies in ash when they hit you, which makes them take 20% increased fire damage. Gives you 10% max life, some fire res, some strength, which kind of matches our strength theme from the Tower Forest strength here. And strength gives you a ton of melee damage and life, so the more the better, right? Chest piece, I'm using a Belly of the Beast, because it gives us a 6-link War Chief setup, which has, I think, like, let me look at how much damage the War Chief does. It's about 500k DPS compared to our 1.15 million, so it's like, it's like 50% more damage right there for a 6-link, which is why I would rather have that than Calms. If you don't want that damage, you can totally move it, but I'd rather have the damage. Belt, I'm using a Belt of the Deceiver. This gives you global physical damage, which of course, since we're Fizz to Fire conversion, works there. A little bit of life, extra damage, reduced extra damage from crits taken, which is a good defensive bonus, some all res, and nearby enemies are intimidated. Intimidated means they take 10% increased damage from attacks. And since we're attacking, they take 10% increased damage. You see the increased damage stacking happening? And then rares, we're using 2 rare opal rings, spike gloves for the melee damage, and some 2-tone boots. Pretty basic stuff. Flask, Taste of Hate, Lion's Roar, Wise Oak. Taste of Hate gives you cold damage, which is converted to fire. It gives you 30% Fizz taken as cold, which is a mitigation ability. And then we get a Basalt Flask with Bleed, with reduced charges used. Make sure you get at least 23% reduced charges used, so you can get 2 uses out of it. But immunity to bleed, immunity to freeze, you can swap up whichever one's where, it doesn't matter. And then same thing here, try to get reduced charges used. I didn't have one, so I just used a max charges one. Lion's Roar gives you more melee physical damage, which converts to your fire damage, again, great. And then a Wise Oak Bismuth Flask. Make sure that you have more fire res than anything else, so that this is actually going to activate, and make sure that's with your taste active. So when it both flasks up, I have more fire than everything else. So I get 20% fire pen, which stacks with my 10% fire pen here, my 10% fire pen from Chieftain. Like, it's just a lot of extra damage. The rares, though, your Opal Rings, you're going to want Fizz, Wed, Life, and then like stats, whatever you can need as stats. Resistances, you're gonna need a fair amount of int somewhere, so I have int on my ring and boots. And you're just gonna need life and resist as always. Gloves, same thing, life, resist, extra fire, extra fizz to attacks. Attack speed would be great here. If you need strength, or if you want strength and can afford to get it, get it. More strength, more life, more damage, right? And then boots. These are actually really bad boots. Like, I needed a bunch of cold res, so I just picked these up. But ideally, you'd get a pair of rare boots that have the damage penetrates 10% of ally resistance if you haven't killed recently. So that would put us up to like 50% fire pen if we haven't killed recently, such as in Shaper fights when he's not spawning ads. You get a ton of extra damage all the time there. Then we go to your links. So our Ice Crash main setup is Ice Crash, melee physical damage, elemental damage with attacks, cold to fire, and then LE focus, and the last link is Conk effects, swap AoE for clear. Pretty simple. But the way the conversion works is, at least as far as I understand it, Ice Crash is 50% physical to cold, cold to fire is 50% cold to fire, and Avatar of Fire is 50% of everything to fire. So for some reason it converts everything into pure fire damage. It's clean. Other links, your War Chief setup, you got, where is it? Ancestral War Chief, Conk effect, melee fizz, cold to fire, elemental damage with attacks, and LE focus. And then your casting damage taken setup, Immortal Call, Flammability, Lightning Golem for the attack and cast speed. If you want fizz mitigation, you can use a Chaos Golem or a Fire Golem, totally up to you. And then I'm using a Flammability here to give them that negative fire res, which is a huge bonus for us, dev damage. Movement skill, Leap Slam, Fortify, faster attacks, Blood Magic, or if you can sustain the mana, which I can't really do without, you can use Endurance on melee stun for some extra fizz mitigation and resistances while mapping, but I'm using Blood Magic for Shaper and whatnot. And then random 3-link, I have Blood Rage, Herald of Ash, and Hatred. Hatred gives us a ton of extra cold damage, which is converted all the way into fire. Herald of Ash gives you a ton of extra fire damage and ignites things that you one-shot, which is a pretty huge one-shot, so everything around that circle gets ignited for 25% of the overkill damage. This increased fire damage roll is actually global. I wish I could like move this while talking about it. And then I have a random 1-link portal. If you wanted to use a Vol Haste here, you could. If you were wearing a Calm's Heart, you could put your War Chief totem in this slot and then just wear a Calm's and lose all of these other links. Totally up to you. But yeah, I believe that's everything. This is actually like a fairly easy to throw together character. Obviously, you wouldn't have a disfavor at the start of a league, but if you just had a rare axe, like a Hezmana's, for example, would carry you in endgame just fine. Rare helmet, rare necklace, instead of opals, just rare rings, rare chests, rare belt, rare boots. Like, just all the simple stuff. Scale into this style of build, and you'd be fine. And according to Path of Building, this is what we theory crafted, actually. We theory crafted 1.12 million DPS with everything up. And then in our actual character, the one I'm wearing right now, we ended up with 1.15 million DPS, which is actually better. But yeah, it's got room to grow. Obviously, my gear's pretty bad. I'm missing a lot of life on my rings and my gloves and my boots, which is literally all the rares. My jewels are not perfect, but they're pretty good. But yeah, I'll leave the pacement for this character in the description below this video, and the Shaper and after this. But if you enjoyed the video, leave a like, leave a comment, you can follow me on Twitch if you want to like watch me do this sort of stuff live and help me theory craft it. Otherwise, thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next video, and that'll be Demi out. I forgot 3 things. Enchants Soul Solaris with Capture Jorah, Sky's Edge, and Soul of Grithkul or Soul of Tukohama, up to you for the fizz mitigation. And then I also forgot the Helm Enchant. You want Ice Crash physical gain is extra cold. The options are 40% damage, this, or AoE. This gives a huge amount more damage than the increased damage does because it's like a little bit of a hatred effect, so I'd recommend that over anything else.